he lies in embryo form, his body occupies 9/12 of a circle. In the same way, the Greeks believed that the human brain is 9/12 of a sphere. All these symbolisms, while they may or may not be sustained historically, or we will say physiologically, are still of interest to us. So what do we find? That from a very early time, there were 3 steps or degrees of the state mystery introduced to make possible the complete birth of man. In the ancient wisdom teachings, therefore, man is born by 9 months of generation and 3 degrees of initiation. The broken wheel being mended by the ritual or rite. For the silver cord is loosened, and the wheel is broken at the system. The broken wheel, which occurs very often in early religious symbolism, is this symbol of imperfection, the incomplete being, the 9/12 creature. Now, number 9 is also the symbol of limitation, because according to the Greeks, imperfection exists throughout matter, and the created universe, which is the archetype for man, man being the microcosm, the world being the macrocosm, is also itself 9/12 of creation, or of a creative power. The Pythagoreans recognized this also by establishing 9 levels or layers of the mundane world. They recognized, after the Egyptians, the universe or solar system or world, they used these terms rather interchangeably in those days, as symbolized by the cross-section of an onion with its concentric circles, one inside of the other. And in this cross-sectioning, which is incidentally the same concept of the universe that appears in Dante and in Milton, the layers are 9 in number, the lowest of them being the Earth, above which are the 7 orbits of the planets, making 8, and then the 9th, which is the sphere of the fixed stars, being a circle surrounding the rest. Therefore, according to Plato, souls coming into generation fell from the sphere of the fixed stars, descended through the orbits of the planets, and finally entered the earth, or the crotor, the cup, the vessel which receives these things. Man is therefore represented by them as 8 plus 1, or 9. 8 being the symbol of principles, and the 9th of the depository or cup, the crotor, which receives principles, being the physical form or body. Man is therefore 8-fold in his complete superphysical construction. And to this is ended or added body, which is the receptacle of principles, but is not itself a principle. Man thus combined or formed together is the symbol of this imperfect pattern, this unbalanced structure, this wheel which cannot turn and cannot support the load for which it was intended. The wheel, incidentally, was not only by the Greeks, but also by the Mayas and Aztecs of Central America, regarded as a symbol of imperfection, and no wheeled vehicle was used in America prior to the coming of the Spaniards. They considered it a symbol of ill luck or of evil. They declared that when the wheel came, civilization would die. Well, we've got a few wheels around here. I don't know whether it has brought about the problem that we know. The wheels within wheels can be dangerous. The 9 is a symbol of man because it was also associated with a positive pole of generation. Man not only has these 9 tenths or 9 twelfths of a completeness, but according to the ancients, he had 9 bodily orifices. He had 9 essential systems of bodily structure, and throughout all of his development, there was a repetition of the cycle of 9. The combination of 9 and 6 equals the sign of Cancer, by the way, which is the symbol of generation in the zodiac. Man, therefore, represents a generating power, which lacks the completeness or the fullness of regenerative capacity. Man as 9 must therefore be subject to salvation because in some way he is imperfect. The Chinese carry this symbolism to quite a degree because whenever they produce a work of art, they intentionally make a flaw so that it shall not be said that they aspire to the perfection which peculiarly belongs to heaven. And when the Japanese painter and sculptor Kobo Daishi, one of the founders of the great Shingon-shu, one of the great divisions of Buddhism in Japan, was making the dragons on the top of the gate of a temple, he did so beautifully that when he put the last drop of paint exactly where it belonged, the dragons began to move. He was so perfect that he had bestowed life. And therefore, with the quickness of mind for which he was always justly distinguished, he took a little paint of the wrong color and put it on, and immediately the dragons returned to wood again. A nice symbolism, but implying or suggesting this idea that man, were he complete, would indeed be a god. And that the universe could, so to say, come completely to life in him. But there is something lacking, something mysterious, like the mysterious ingredient for the philosopher's stone, which the alchemist sought everywhere but could never find. And this imperfection is the key to humanity, and therefore the number 9, which incidentally also was an important number because it contains 3 triads. And these 3 triads were themselves symbolic of the nature of man, who has a 3-fold spiritual nature, a 3-fold psychic nature, and a 3-fold body. Thus he has everything except the cord to string them together with, and that remains until another number. Man has all the faculties, but he is now struggling desperately for the establishment of that which is missing. And that is what the modern psychologist likes to term integration. Oneness, to bind them together. Man is still a creature divided, because his 9 needs the 1 to make it a unit, to make it a oneness again. So we are not surprised then that the decad, or the number 10, is called by Pythagoras what? Faith. And that is only one of the names, however, which he gave it. Not faith, faith. F-A-I-T-H. Because it is the object of all human sincere contemplation. The decad is called the triumph of number. It is number which, having moved from unity through diversity, establishes a new kind of integration. It is the achievement of the unity of totality, For the 10 becomes the symbol of the whole tetractys, or the sum of number. As the 1 is a symbol of indivisible unity, the 10 is the symbol of attained unity. The final consummation of all things in the perfection of themselves is 10. Because to the Pythagoreans, 10 equals perfection, which in turn equals unity. For in their thinking, all things to be perfect must be established in a state of indivisible oneness. A perfect mind must be absolutely unified. A perfect society must be a perfect unit. Everything must be a unit. And by unity, not a compelled unit, but an attained unit. The 10, therefore, is the voluntary association of numbers and their consummation in the reestablishment of a concept of totality. Now, how does man at this stage think this through? How is he to envision a totality which he cannot experience? Every human being merely is looking toward something more than he is. He is seeking peace, security, happiness, sufficiency. All of these things are different from the one, inasmuch as they are achieved unities, or the cycle of the one, passing through diversity and reaffirming itself. So the cipher becomes the symbol of the cycle, or the motion by means of which things return to themselves. But the addition of the cipher to the unit makes this unit the appropriate archetypal form for the tetractys, or the 10 dots. For it is the sum of all number, and any number absent results in the loss of the 10. Nor can there be any essential number above the 10. For 10, says Pythagoras, exhausts the diversity of number, as man, through the experience of living, exhausts the diversity of experience. And when you have experienced everything, what have you? Unity. There is nothing else you can have. When you know everything, you know one thing. Because everything is merely a phase of one thing. There are not 10 wisdoms in the world. There is one wisdom with 10 ways of reaching it. But no matter how you travel, no matter what you learn, you can only exhaust diversity. And when you have realized that, you have achieved the consciousness of absolute unity. So unity in the sense of 10 is the exhaustion of all numbers. And the numbers are like, in the old legend, are represented by rivers, which flowing down all meet in the number 10, which represents the sea. And the number 10, of course, is a potential one, because the sun will raise the water from the sea, carry it in the clouds, drop it on the mountains, where it will become many streams, and will finally come back and converge again into the sea. So the journey from the sea to the sea is the journey from the 1 to the 10. And it is infinitely repeated. But Plotinus calls it the journey of that which is alone, the one, to that which is alone is, the sea. The drop of water and the sea are both unity. So the number 10, having fulfilled all things, is considered the archetypal number, of course, of adeptship, or of the perfection of everything that can be perfected or achieved by man. In every department of life, the 10 is the beginning plus the method or the means or the intervals and the end, which is in the beginning. And in the great Egyptian glyphs of Raphael, this is the serpent with a tail in his mouth. Because all things are moving in this eternal cycle. Thus Pythagoras, affirming the basis of his entire mathematical system, also established for us the concept of the decimal system, by which all things are measured in terms of 10. And in this basic concept, we think, we do not know, that perhaps mankind developed the idea from the 10 fingers, which he first used in counting. And there is the old story, you know, that when he had to get to 11, he had to take a shoe off. There was the concept of the 10, and the 10 in the Kabbalah, of course, was composed of 2 5s, which were the hands. The placing of the hands in certain Jewish rituals represents the union of these 2 5s, which in turn represent the 2 tablets of the law, each containing 5 of the commandments. So the 10 commandments, which constitute the law and the prophets, is another statement of the completeness or fulfillment of universal laws in the Decad. And the Decad was completed originally by the old legend, inasmuch as the inscription on one tablet of the law was raised, and the inscription on the other tablet of the law was engraved into the tablet, so that when the 2 tablets met, the raised and the sunken parts united, forming one absolutely solid pattern. This, of course, represented the union of the positive and negative principles, or the polarized concept of law and order, or law and the prophet, or the old and the new dispensation, and all that has to do with it. Now, the addition of 1 to 9 equals the 10. Therefore, the number 1 added to the 9 becomes also a messianic symbol, and is so represented in nearly all religious systems. Because there appears the intercessor, the comforter, the soter, the messiah, who in each life plays the part of the 1 to make the 9 10. He is available, or this power is forever supplementing the 9 to make the 10, and is so recognized in the Jewish metaphysical system and also in the Christian Kabbalah of the Middle Ages. The 10, then, we have now as a symbol of the completeness, of the wholeness or the fullness of a thing. The numbers have fulfilled their parts. They have been added together, and out of the addition of the first 4 numbers is restored the number 1 again, because the number 1 is the first part of the 10. Now the Pythagoreans and other numerologists after them have taken another attitude, namely that you take your compound numbers, for example, and you add these numbers to find again your basic unity, according to the gematria and the notaticon of the Kabbalists. Thus, for instance, if you have a number 25, you take the 2, add it to the 5, and you have 7, and you go back to your basic pattern again. So all numbers above 10 are reducible to numbers under 10. general exception in some systems is that two numbers, 11 and 22, are not reduced. These have to do with certain key letters of the Jewish alphabet. But it is normal, for instance, to take a number above 10 and add the parts of it to produce another number. Thus 34, you add together, you have 7. 29 becomes 11. And that number you do not reduce, but leave it 11. Thus, in all these systems, you have some other interesting problems that appear. Now, when we come to the study of certain numbers, we find other habits about them that are interesting. The number 5 multiplied by itself will always have itself as in the final term of the multiplication. 5 5s are 25. This number, or the number 6 multiplied by itself, will always have the number 6. 6 sixes are 36, and the number is returned, or is recurrent. Now, by this process, what do we have? We have here 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10. And if you add them all together, you get 55, and add those, you get 10 again. 5 and 5 equal 10. And so you go. And you find these numbers are infinitely repeating formulas. And these formulas are the things that to the Pythagoreans reveal the infinite power of number. Now there is one use which they all made, and which we have totally lost, in which they did combine letters and numbers for a certain purpose. Thus, for example, when they wished to conceal an energy, universal power, or agency under a name, they would select for that name one the sum of which, numerically, would be equal to the power intended. This was done by a particular process. Therefore, the Gnostics took the deity Abraxas, which was their god of the cycle, and the Greek number system associated with the letters is such that the numerical power of Abraxas is 365, which is the symbol of the year. They frequently made use of this type of symbolism. Therefore, the number 666, which is associated in Revelation with the beast, is the sum of the numerical value of the Greek word, which means the lower intellect. Thus, they used words and numbers to indicate particular meanings, in order that each of these meanings might be meaningful and obvious through a Kabbalah or through a method. Thus, according to Pythagoras, take the names of any of the Greek deities, take their numerical equivalent, and you can reduce them on the tetractys to the power for which they stand. This is because these names were selected by the ancient Orphics with this purpose in mind. And the Egyptian system upon which it was built was much earlier than Greek civilization, although Pythagoras was the first to publicly describe it. Thus, all, perhaps, of the admonitions that we find in the book of Revelation, for instance, are meaningful. For it calls a particular spiritual penalty upon anyone who shall change the spelling of a single name. And no one knows why. But it was because of this analogy between the meanings of letters and of the power of number. Thus, letters were associated with number in this way. But I think you will see that thus, in this application, we are not necessarily dealing with a problem of divination, We are dealing with a cipher by means of which we can substitute letters for numbers, and in that way create words which are appropriate names for things, and yet which do not necessarily have the meaning that we first suspect. It is an excellent manner for making a concealment of some kind, which could go back to the science of numbers. This was used a great deal in the Old Testament, where many names are merely very carefully concealed mathematical formulas. So by these formulas, you get another way of reaching into the mystery involved, or the idea behind the use of certain letters and characters. So in general, that is what we can cover in connection with this concept of number. Those of you who are interested in going further with it, you will find a section in our book on symbolical philosophy devoted to this, and with a fairly complete development of the basic number patterns as recorded by Theon of Smyrna. For those who are intrigued beyond this point in their study of the Pythagorean theory of number, I believe one of the best available texts, although it is a difficult one, and very scarce, that can be consulted here in our library, and that is Higgins' great work, The Anacalyptic. This work shows a great deal of research into Pythagorean number. Many secret societies, incidentally, that survive today have numerical symbols which can be reinterpreted in terms of letters and back and forth. These things become an interesting problem. Irenaeus describes the Logos, or the great figure, blazing in light with every letter of the Greek alphabet located on some part of its body. And of course, Pythagoras tells us that his own name, which was not his real name, but the name Pythagoras contains within its numerical and letter powers the entire secret of his doctrine. It was never left in any other form. So this is the philosophy of numbers.